Hey guys, and welcome to the Not So Sunday podcast, where we talk about what it looks like to live like Jesus more than just one day a week. And I'm here with Jenny, who is not Nikki. So what's up, Jenny?
I'm not Nikki. Yes, I'm good, Case. How are you?
Doing great. Just been doing life and just trying
snuggling that little baby of yours.
Absolutely that, and trying to catch up on sleep whenever we get the chance.
Oh.
What about you? What are you looking up to?
Yeah, we are like in rest mode in my house because the weddings are over, graduation's over. And so we are not staying up late nights with little children. And so we're in rest mode. It's been great. It's been fun. We're empty nesters, kind of.
That's awesome. What's your favorite part about it?
Oh, please don't judge me. I don't have to cook dinner or buy groceries for anybody.
Wow.
Yes. Aaron and I, about a month ago, decided that he loves to shop at Randazzo's, and that's what he cares about. And I like snacks, and that's what I care about. So he's like, why don't you just go for snacks and I'll go to Randazzo's? And that's the way we've been working for a month, and it's been great.
That's a great system.
Yeah.
Man, so what do you miss the most then?
I miss my kids in my house, but they created a ton of trash. We took our garbage out last night and we realized we just don't have trash anymore. We don't have trash. We don't have recycling. They were the messy ones, I think. So my home has been clean and but I miss my kids, of course.
Yeah, even having a baby, we went from one trash bag a week to 3. And I was
the diapers will get you.
This is wild.
Right.
And you go out there and you're carrying everyone's watching you at midnight walk out and you have 6 bags of blue and then one regular garbage bag and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. You're like, no, it's not bad. It's just heavy.
Right.
So, but it's been so good. Well, hey, we got to talk about the thing that everyone's wondering.
The thing.
Where's Nikki?
Where is Nikki? I don't know. No, just kidding.
She's gone. She left.
Yes. I'm the new pale-faced Irish version of Nikki. But
the Irish people are taking over this podcast.
Yeah,
it's just
right?
us now. No more Italians.
So Nikki is on a missions trip right now. She is with a team from the Woods Church, and they are in Italy. Woo. I know, right? So there is a small group of them. It's actually kind of cool how this came about. We had the Church of the Nazarene earlier in the year, actually, connected with Renee Rosalino, who is our missions director. She does all of our global missions. And they had asked her, hey, would you guys be willing to come this fall and do a trip in Italy? We've got some work we need done. We need we want somebody to preach. And so we hadn't been on the global mission field since before COVID. We have not taken a team from the Woods Church in years. And at that time, Costa Rica was kind of questionable. And so we said, you know what, let's jump at the opportunity that we felt like God was giving us. And so this small team was formed. There's a bunch of construction guys on the team and some of our staff. And so they are in Italy for the next week and a half.
That sounds like a blast.
Yes.
It's not just I feel like every time someone goes somewhere like that for missions, everybody's instantly oh man, you're really suffering
missions
for the Lord.
Missions in the Caribbean, missions on Turks and Caicos, right? Missions in Italy.
It's hey, it's a vacation, but it's not.
Right.
It's really not.
Oh yeah, it's not.
Whether you're the person doing the physical labor or you're the person building relationships, it takes intentionality and it takes effort. So it's so good. Well, as we're talking about this and kind of already have the subject out there, we're just going to be straightforward. That's what we're talking about for this episode. We're going to talk a little bit about missions. What are missions? What do they look like? Why do we go on them? And if you haven't been on one, why not? What's holding you back? So we're going to talk all of those things throughout this. But maybe first, we're going to switch up a little bit. I know I had this towards the end, but why don't you share a little bit of your experience with missions?
Sure. So and missions is a broad word, right? There's the big missions, there's the smaller, at the Woods Church, we talk about global missions and local missions. And so for the purposes of today, it's kind of the global missions part of things. So I had the opportunity to go on my first missions trip when I was 18. It was spring break of my senior year. And I was at the Woods Church then, and we were going to Australia. So it was my first missions trip. It was the first time I had really left my parents. It was my first plane ride.
That's a long plane ride too.
Everything since then has been easy because our first plane ride was 26 hours to Australia. Yes. And so, we went to Australia for 2 weeks when I was 18. And then, I went away to college and came back and kind of got in the swing of things. And so when we partnered with Compassion International in El Salvador, I went a couple times there too. And El Salvador was different. I think I had different eyes probably then too. But, El Salvador, we were in this poor community. We had, my husband and I had adopted a sponsor child from El Salvador at the time. And so we got to meet this little guy that we were sponsoring. He was the same age as Zeke.
That's so sweet.
Yes, we did that on purpose. And So I had been to El Salvador. My husband had been to El Salvador to meet him. Both of our girls have been to El Salvador multiple times. And in our home, one of the things that Aaron and I try to do is that we wanted to make sure that our kids, while they were at like teenager age, like shapeable mind still age, went on a global mission trip, preferably to a poor country, because it's so important for our kids to learn that not everybody grows up like we grow up here in America, right? Like all the stats of like how rich we are as Americans, even if you don't feel like you're rich, how rich you really are as Americans. And so El Salvador was a huge turning point for us as a family. Unfortunately, COVID came and we never got to, Zeke didn't get to go to El Salvador, but not only did we get to work on that mission field, but we got to watch the child that we sponsored grow up. And so I think so cool. I met him first and he was 5. And the last time we were there, he was like 15. And so yeah. So I have a huge heart for global missions because I think there's so much work to be done. And there's so much good to be done. And, essentially you like go to help people, but man, what it does in your own heart is nothing like you can, unless you experience it, it's just not happening. And so, yeah, so that's my global missions. Case?
Yeah. Mine's looked a little bit different. I was supposed to go on global missions a few times during the whole pandemic season. We had plans to go to, oh my goodness, to go to Thailand.
We're
going to go to Thailand.
Yes,
we were going to be on that trip too. 3 times, and it was super exciting. And
summer of 2020, summer of 2021, right. Summer of 2022.
And it just fell through. And honestly, like part of me was just like heartbroken, and it was like, oh no, like I don't get to participate. And then part of me was like, had to remember like, man, there's so many ways that we can engage in missions. And for me, I have a huge heart for the local mission field. I love serving our community and even like some of the people in need at our church. And when you really look at it, there's so many opportunities. I haven't been to another country for missions, but I've been to Alaska. I have went to Midland when there was crazy flooding. So it was just a few hours north of us, and like really spend some time like in different areas locally serving. And it's just as much of a blessing, but the impact is a little bit different on how it feels for you, because when you're serving in your community, you're not going as far away, you're not separated, you're not missing home while also experiencing people in their culture and in their life. You're actually just kind of stepping next door and kind of experiencing things, which is very different, but it's still very special.
Yeah. I remember my grandpa, when I was fundraising for the Australia trip when I was only 18, I remember my grandpa said, honey, it's not that I don't support what you're doing, but why on earth do you have to go halfway across the world? Like, why can't you do that in your backyard? And that always stuck with me, right? Because global missions isn't a substitute for going to Midland and serving when there's floods, and serving in your own backyard and serving your own neighbors. Like, it's got to be a both and.
Absolutely.
And I think there's some people that like genuinely, like I know my dad will always say like, I just don't have really a desire to go to global missions. He will work hard in this community, but he financially has always supported me, my kids, all sorts of people to do global missions. And so I think there's parts of it that can go both ways.
Absolutely. And your dad is such a great example of someone who serves in his community and like serves hard. Like even like last week had a group of guys serving in the community, working on a woman from our church's house.
Right.
She had recently moved into a new house and there was a lot of work to be done. And a group of guys said, hey, we got time, we got energy, we'll go do it. And
local missions.
It's local missions. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think that in order to get a really good grasp of what missions look like, we need to take a minute to really buckle down on the idea and like the term, because I think that we use it so frequently in the church, but does everyone know what it means? So like, what even is missions? And at its core, I believe that missions is what the Lord calls us to. Like he tells us to go out and make disciples of all nations.
Right.
And we start with that place of saying it's a mandate and a calling on our lives to go and be the kingdom wherever we go. And that's not limited to local. It's not limited to global, but it's limited to every single day as we go. It really isn't a limit on it, but it's to go out and make disciples. But there's more to it, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Missions is such a broad term that so many churches use. And so the idea of making disciples everywhere that you are. And, we have the capability a lot of times as Americans to be able to go to other countries and go to places that genuinely what we can bring is really helpful to people there. And so I love the partnerships that we've been able to grow in missions, because it's not just about going one time and doing one thing and being the Americans that jumped in to help, right? Like that's not the intention of missions. And that's not what the Lord has called us to either, but so much more the building of relationships that results in the discipleship that is able to be had. It's such a beautiful thing when there's discipleship that happens when people don't speak the same language even, that's some of my favorite parts of seeing discipleship happen, is that the Lord is sovereign over all. And so whether you are in El Salvador and speaking Spanish or in Midland and speaking English, like the Lord is sovereign over all. And that ties you tighter than you can imagine when you're in that situation.
That's so awesome. I think one of the big things too, when it comes to missions, is like we get this understanding of it, and we feel like, especially in America, it's like missions is us going out. But like, I didn't even know until I started working at the church that like people come here on mission. They come to America and serve it over here. And like, you'll see there's a tragedy that happens, or there's another hurricane or another flood or another fire. And people are coming from other countries to come and to serve. Or even so, like, I didn't know that people come from other countries to come and disciple people here. And then I heard about that. I was like, wow, I think that we miss that in America.
We're a missions field just as much as some of the other countries,
Anywhere there's people, there's an opportunity. And I think that we miss that because we're so used to, like, the defining term is for the American church, like, when we have what we have, we go do. And it's really when the kingdom of God has resources, which it always does.
Right.
Then we're called to utilize those resources to benefit the kingdom.
Yeah. And there's some great organizations that have really mastered what missions can look like. I talked about Compassion International, I think, is one of them, as far as sponsoring kids and like being able to partner with organizations that already do it really well. We've partnered as a church many times with Samaritan's Purse. Like, we don't need to have all the tools and all the things to go in and help after fires and floods. Like, they
you don't even know how. They train you on the
literally
fly.
Right. And so I love being able to partner with those kind of organizations. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel on missions. That's not what the Lord calls us to. He calls us to be ready and able. And so being able to partner, and Renee is a master of that. Renee Rosalino, our missions director, always has connections to the different organizations that we can jump on board with and, move where God is already moving, right? Just jump on that train and makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. And I love that too, because when we look at it that way, we see like, so what mission started as a simple, like a word that defines the call to go and to make disciples, to go and to serve and to be Jesus in the community. And then what is kind of evolved into is like this beautiful thing where like we have people who are skilled and gifted, and they spend their time and their energy not being the person who does it, but building the community and equipping the people to do it. And I think that's one of our other major misconceptions, is like that in order to be on mission, you have to be a missionary. Like, you have to be the missions director of a church or run a missions organization, or you have to be someone who's sponsored 13 weeks out of the year to go to different countries and visit, and like, you don't take paychecks and you don't do any of these things, but all you do is serve. But really, when it boils down to it, like, we've in the church, which is awesome, we've built an avenue for people who have specialized skills to equip people to do. And like,
you don't have to have any skills to go on a missions team with us.
No.
I mean, I don't have any. Like,
when we were in Midland, I was hanging drywall with a bunch of high schoolers, and none of them had ever done it before. And the guy's just like, "It's fine, you'll figure it out as we go."
Good job, you guys. And we're like, really?
I was like, "Oh, you trust them with this?"
Yeah. One of the times in El Salvador, we were building the second story of this Compassion Center for kids, and I'm like laying brick, and there's what's that red little snappy line to make sure your lines are level, and I learned it, and it hasn't fallen down yet. So you don't even need any special skills.
Clearly, really, we don't even know they are too. I don't even know the names for half the stuff we have to do.
Right. You just really, like, genuinely being able and ready for what the Lord has. Renee always says flexibility, because inevitably, even when you're on the mission field, you have a schedule of what you think you're going to do, and it always changes. So flexibility is always key.
It's so exciting too. It's like so funny. You go in there with those mindsets, and like, really, like, we could kind of transition even in that thought of like, we go in with a preconceived mindset of what's going to happen, but missions changes people.
Oh man.
Whether it's serving in your local community or going across the world to do it, like, it is so evident. There's a few ways that it changes people, but we'll start with like the individual. Like, when you go on mission, like, and you've done this and you've been with people. So you've seen this, like, what does it do? What does it look like in that person's life?
First time I went to El Salvador, I think I wore my sunglasses for 3 straight days because I just kept crying. And sometimes you don't even know why. I don't know that I could have pinpointed. I'm not like a severely emotional person, but something about being obedient to what the Lord, I knew he called me to go on that trip. I got to meet the little boy that we had been sponsoring. Some of these things that were all you're away from your everyday norms, which is so good, right? I didn't have my husband with me. I didn't have my kids with me. I had other people with me that I knew, but I didn't have my crew of safe people around me. You're so out of your element. And it's so good to be out of your element. Man, I just cried those first 3 days because I kept thinking Lord, is this what you've called me to? Are you sure you want me here right now? And then you get to start to experience some of that. And I think that on a missions team, the Lord does something different in everybody's heart. There's nobody that comes back the same as what they left. And sometimes the Lord deals with you on something that maybe he's been dealing with you for years on. Maybe it's something brand new that he shows you. But always when you get pulled out of your normal everyday routine and everyday life, you just see things different. And the Lord has opportunity to show you things in a different way. And so I love the individual part of going and serving and just shedding all of the stuff that you left at home and really stepping into what the Lord has for you. That's actually been my prayer for the team that's in Italy now. They think they're going to serve this church and be a part of it, but who knows what the Lord actually has for each person there.
Yeah, it's proven, and anybody who's ever gone on mission can attest to it, that when you go, it changes you sometimes even more than it does anything else.
Right. You're going to serve, but really the Lord always works on you as well. And so it's great to go and serve others, but the Lord always works on you too.
Absolutely. And I love that, because when you get away from everything, I feel like there's a few consistent things that you see. Like the Lord tenderizes our hearts, makes us more receptive to the needs of other people, more compassionate. He reminds us that we're all called to be disciple makers, whether we are eloquent with our words or whether we are simply serving with our hands. It gives us a way and an avenue to preach the gospel through the way that we live.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. And I think that people don't see that right away. Yeah. But even I was talking to my buddy Sean, and he went to Puerto Rico. And
I went with him on that trip. Yes, I went to Puerto Rico with him.
He's like, dude, I don't know anything about the Bible, but there were so many opportunities where I got to just spend time with people. And he goes in and it changed their lives, but it changed my life too. And he's like, I've never felt more comfortable sharing my faith than understanding that. That is my purpose.
Yeah.
And he goes, and it made me want to do it when I came home too.
Right.
And he did. And that was my favorite thing. He's texting his friends. He's like, exciting. Dude, you got to hang out with me. I just went on a mission trip and I'm on fire for Jesus. And his friends are like, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
Do you need an extinguisher?
Okay,
Let me put you out. And he's like, no, I just want to share the Lord with you. And you see that when people come back, even if it's just building a house somewhere in their community, they come back with this desire, oh my goodness, this feels good because I'm doing what I was created to do.
The first time Aaron went to El Salvador, he came back and he was day one, he was like, Jen, we need to have a conversation. I said, okay. And he said, we don't understand what it's like to live in sacrifice. And he said, when I went there, a little boy we sponsor, we asked his mom, how could we, the Nitzes, how could we serve your family? And she said, what I really need is a stove, because if I had a stove, I could make these fluffy empanada things. And if I could make those, then I could create an income in my house. And so Aaron said, listen, Jen, this is what we're going to do. And my husband is so easy about 98% of things in life. When the 2% of things come, I really listen. He said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sell my truck. We're going to give that money, every bit of it. We're going to give it to the family down in El Salvador. We went through compassion and did the right way. He said, and then we're going to live for 6 months on one vehicle. And I was like, we have 3 little kids. We're forever taking kids somewhere. And he said, but we don't actually, we don't understand sacrifice. And so we're going to sacrifice by selling our paid off vehicle, giving all the money, and then learning how to live. And every time it's inconvenient for us to live on one vehicle, we're going to remember what sacrifice actually kind of looks like. And so I love my husband. I know this sounds silly, but he loved that truck.
I was one of the youth students that used to share this kind of stuff with. And I heard these stories.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And so it just shapes you and changes you in a way that you're never the same after that. And so even now, I think sometimes I'm man, I'm so thankful to have 2 vehicles in our home. And how many of us actually think that you just assume that you should have two vehicles, right? And so, yeah, it changes you.
It does. And it's crazy because I think that like parallels so quickly to understand like what impact it has on the people when you go and you jump into a community and you engage. Like one, it changes your heart for those people, but two, like you understand like there's a sacrificial need in my life to give to something greater. Because like for us, like a 2-car household is no big deal. Like
it's an expectation, right?
Like, it's like, how would we even survive without that? But over there, it's like, you have a car?
Right.
Like you have 2 cars? Like, do you also have a mansion and do you have like 6 tigers? Like, no, like we don't really feel like we have all that much, but then you see that and you come back and you're like, I think we can make do with less.
Sure.
And what it really does is it opens up an avenue.
And we can make do with less, right? 100%. It's just inconvenient. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I don't like to be inconvenienced. I'll drive to a drive-through just to not be inconvenienced to have to go in and get something, right? Like,
yeah, I have both of the windows on my vehicle don't function right now because of the wiring, but it's such an inconvenient thing for me to stop and fix it that like I'm just gonna live this way. Like it doesn't matter to me. I'm not gonna go and get it fixed. I'm not gonna go to drive-throughs anymore.
Can somebody please fix Casey's windows?
I got it. I can do it. I just haven't stopped. But like when you see it, like man, like it's so different.
Yeah.
I don't even have words to describe it. Like we live such a different life, but it changes things. And I can't wait to get out globally and experience that because like I feel like I'm living vicariously through all the people who go and I'm like, oh my goodness, like your life is transformed and
Casey's
I love that
gonna come
for
back
you.
and sell everything.
Don't listen to this, Jess. I can't sell everything. You know that.
Shoot, he won't.
I'll try not to. But you know my heart. I will. I'll want to right away. So it changes. We know it changes us. It changes the community we go and visit. But like, what does it do for the church? Like as a whole, like there's something special that happens when the church engages in this call, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's one simple thought, right? It's unity. Like it unifies the church when we go on mission.
Yeah, for sure. You've got that team that actually went, but then you've got all those people behind that team that are the family and friends of that team. You've got the people that have been praying for that team. You've got the people that like are so excited to follow them on social media and hear the stories and hear the testimonies of when they come back. And
you've got those people who financially backed a mission.
Right.
They have zero desire to travel, but they're like, man, like I have this to give.
But they'll back it. Yeah. And so that's part of what I love about our church doing partnerships is that when we were involved in El Salvador for so long, even if I didn't go on that trip, I knew the people that were going. I knew what they were seeing. I knew what they were experiencing. I knew the people they were meeting. And when you came home, you could share those stories and there was that common ground. And it just continues to build the unity of the church when you know what the Lord has called you to and you do it. Yeah.
I mean, I remember like one of the things that's so evident is that like it unifies your church and the church you go to be a part of too. When the partnership with El Salvador was a big thing, and that season was so cool. I remember the first time I got Facebook, I would get friend requests from all of the people in El Salvador, and they would message you, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're from the Woods Church. We love you guys.
Right.
Like our church is our partners, and your pastor knows my pastor." And it was so cool because, like, though I wasn't there, like there was a sense of family across the world, saying like, "Hey."
Yeah.
Like, let's participate, let's engage. So I think it really does speak to the truth of like a church on mission is a church unified, not just within itself, but globally. And it's so cool.
Yeah. I love that the Church of the Nazarene as a whole, even global missions is such an important part of who we are, like our DNA. So the Woods Church for sure, but it actually comes from the heart of the Church of the Nazarene and the amount of missionaries that we support and the amount of new works that are started all over the world because of the Church of the Nazarene. Yeah.
I mean, even like the Nazarene churches, like their mission is like we were talking about Samaritan's Purse and the resources they have, but like the resources that like the Nazarene church has poured into missions is so cool. And like to realize that like we're not even necessarily the majority of the Nazarene church. Like we are a part of the Nazarene church here, but there are so many Nazarene churches globally that are serving in their communities and they're sending people out into other communities. And like when you look at our districts and our generals and all of these superintendents, all these leadership, like it's so diverse because the church understands like our mission isn't to be with who we are. Is to be with
the church should be diverse, right? Like that should be part of who we are, is a diverse place. Yeah.
And it's so cool. So obviously like we could talk about missions forever. Like I've never gone outside of our country, but like it's so clear that the Lord has made us for this.
Right.
What would you say to the person who is like, I've never gone, I've never served locally, I've never served globally. Like, I don't even know if I have a heart for it yet. What would you say to this person?
I don't know that you need to have a heart for local or global missions. I think that's what the Lord calls us to is serving and being a part of that. And so if you are waiting until you get really excited about somewhere, like, I don't know, you might be waiting a long time, right? I think that it's part of being obedient. Like I often talk about giving and tithing in like the obedience form, because you're not always excited about doing things, but there are things that the Lord calls you to. And so I think that the Lord has called us to missions. And so whether that's your community or the United States somewhere or globally, like 100%, you should try it. I do think that when it comes to globally, I do think that if you pray about something and the Lord moves in you, then you got to try it. Like you got to do it.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of constraints. I know, right? There's always time off of work, and there's the amount of money to go on the trip. There's who's going to watch the kids. There's all these logistics, but I promise you that if you have prayed about it and the Lord is like pushing you, you feel that push, He will work out the rest of those things.
Right. No, that's so good. And I think that when we really wrestle with it, like if we're waiting for it, and I love that how you responded, I just don't know if I have a heart for it. Like you might not necessarily feel like you have a heart for missions, but if you have a heart for the Lord, then missions is something that He calls you to.
Right. It's just a natural byproduct of who you are in the Lord.
It just might look different for you. Like every person has a different way that their heart is pulled towards, but like we're all going to be created with a heart intent to
on
expand mission. The gospel and to just see the kingdom here on earth. So, one more thing before we go for the time that we're here, like we have some opportunities coming up.
Yes,
right?
I was hoping I could talk about Costa Rica. Yes, so we talk about El Salvador and that partnership that we had. And it was a beautiful partnership for so long, and then eventually the church in El Salvador, they just didn't need us anymore, which is so great, cool. Right? It's kind of like parents, like when your kids are leaving, like you're proud to see them leave. And that's a bit how our partnership in El Salvador was. And so we've been praying as a church and as leadership for the last few years of like, Lord, is there somewhere else that you want us to partner with that we could be a bit of a long-term? And so Renee and Pastor John and a few others took kind of a mini trip to Costa Rica in April, May, I think, of this year. And met the pastor down there. And the pastor down there, I think he's like a little mini Pastor John McDonald, because he is excited, he's fired up, and but he has such a vision for his community. And so as they spent time with this pastor and his team, and literally walking the grounds of where this pastor envisions a sanctuary and soccer fields and what that means to his community, like I think the more that they spent time with him, the more they got excited about it. And so it's a Church of the Nazarene that's down in Costa Rica. And so we have our first trip coming in January. And so I would encourage you, man, pray about being a part of the team. I know that we initially talked about maybe there being some like heavy duty work on there. Now they're talking about maybe a little bit more evangelism. To me, I signed up to go on the trip because I was like, I think that the Lord is going to do something really cool in Costa Rica. And honestly, I want to be a part of it. Like I want to be a part of what He's going to do. And so that's trips in January. And then we've already got a trip scheduled with our youth next summer to go back down to Costa Rica. And so again, going back down and being a part of what the Lord is doing there. I think there's a fall trip that's going to be happening too. And so if you are even interested, I would encourage you, start praying about it. Let the Lord provide a way. If that's what He's calling you to do. I think it's like 8 days. It's not like a whole month of your life or anything. It's right after Christmas. It's right in the blah of January. And so,
doesn't sound so bad.
Right? Yes.
Get a little sunshine away. It's not a vacation, but it will be refreshing.
It will stretch you. You will work hard, but you will, it's really good. Yeah. The Lord just moves. And so, yeah, there's information. If you follow the Woods Church on Church Center app, there's information about it. But I would really encourage you to have a conversation. Have a conversation with me. Have a conversation with Renee. Have a conversation with Casey. Somebody that could maybe help guide you through. I've never gone,
but I'll tell you to go anytime.
Right?
Hey, if you aren't from the Woods Church, man, I would encourage you, connect with your church, ask around, say, hey, what are we doing on the global mission field? What are we doing in the local mission field? How can I be a part of it? And if your church doesn't have anything going on yet, how can you start it? How can you initiate something new?
Or I was going to say, come to Costa Rica with us.
Or you can come to Costa Rica with us. We'll meet you there. We'll coordinate flights. Just call us. We'll make it happen.
Sure.
But no, for real, like engage wherever you're at. There's always an opportunity to serve the Lord and to see His kingdom here on earth. And we don't want to be people who miss out on it. Right. I love what you said. Like, you're like, I don't necessarily know what part of it, like, I want to be there for, but like, I think Jesus is going to do something awesome. And I don't want to miss out on that. Man, neither do I. I never want to miss out on what the Lord is doing.
Yeah.
So good.
It's good.
Awesome. Well, hey, before we close out, would you pray for us?
Yeah, sure. God, thank you so much for how clear you make it to us to be a part of missions. And God, that we just want to partner with you on what you're doing and where you're moving. And so, God, I pray for the hearts of those that are listening, God, that you would soften hearts of ones that maybe have never even entertained the idea of missions before. God, I pray that you would raise up leadership in those that maybe their church doesn't have any kind of local or global missions happening. God, I pray that you would give them courage, that would rise up in them. God, thank you for our team that's in Italy right now. And God, I pray that you would just move in a way that only you can in each of them individually. God, I pray for the greater church in Italy, that you would just continue to move in the church as well. God, thank you for Renee and for her leadership. God, I pray for our team headed to Costa Rica in just a few months. And Lord, we are excited to be moving with you in what you're already doing. And so, God, to you be all the praise and glory. Amen.
Amen. Man, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us and talking missions. We'll have to have you back on again.
All right.
Maybe you'll just become one of our reoccurring guests.
Maybe Nikki will go somewhere again and you'll put the Irish girl in.
You guys let me know. You just send us a message. Let us know. Do you want more Jenny in our podcast?
Don't put me against Nikki. I'm not going to win that one.
Not against Nikki, but hey, you can just keep coming back and hanging out with us.
Okay, that's fair.
We have up to 4 mics. We can squeeze the whole church if we need to.
The whole church is
cram everybody around the table. All right. Well, before we go crazy and go too far into that, we just want to thank you guys for joining us. And until next time, would you guys passionately pursue God and relentlessly reveal Jesus to the world?
Every day of the week.
See ya.